You just listened to a bit of jog that I played a few years back. I wanted the talk to begin where Rāga knowledge truly begins, not in speech, but in sounding bodies. Namaste, friends. When we speak of knowledge in the university, we mostly imagine it as something that can be written, cited, archived, and transmitted through text. Yet, some of the most profound forms of knowing do not first appear in language. They live in habit, in gesture, in listening, in the cultivated intelligence of the body. Hindustani Rāga music offers us one such knowledge system. Here, knowing is not merely conceptual but enacted through practice. A Rāga is not fully known because one can define its arohan, avarohan, list its characteristic phrases and trace its historical genealogy. It is known when it begins to breathe through the musician, through voice, through fingers, timing, anticipation, restraint, and release. This is why I wish to approach Rāga today not simply as a musical form, but as a mode of embodied recognition and a practice-based epistemology. About a month back, it began as an ordinary conversation at my music room, the kind that often crops up after lesson. One of my students, an accomplished one, already a great artist, had come up with a problem that was not exactly music, but a question about direction. He was a seasoned performer, someone who could unfold a rag for over an hour with natural ease. That day, however, he was seeking something different. He was looking for an academic engagement. He asked, "What should I do, Guruji?" Almost as if stepping into an unfamiliar domain. I suggested quite straightforwardly, "Why don't you try writing, maybe writing a book or a few research papers?" To make it acceptable and meaningful, I proposed that he notate a substantial body of traditional Guts, say 200 of them in English. It seemed a practical bridge between his rich performing knowledge and a wider inquisitive audience. From there, I added he could even explore patterns, commonalities among the compositions, and structural insights. He readily agreed and promised to send me a few samples. When the notation arrived, I got completely astonished. His written transcription struggled to hold the very structure that he performed so easily. A simple 16 matra tintal composition would stretch inexplicably into 18 matras. The internal balance seemed to dissolve on paper. The moment I felt like watching a bird that soars meaningfully in the open sky, yet finds it very awkward when asked to walk straight line on a ground. The incident stayed with me, especially as I reflected on the recurring phrase in the current discourse, embodied transmission. What I witnessed that day was precisely a play of embodied transmission, where non-musical media were out of jurisdiction. His musical knowledge did not reside in symbols, notation, or analytical frameworks. It lived in his trained body, in his listening, in the subtle coordination of mind and gesture shaped over years of immersive practicing. And I know for sure that this is not an exception. Many of our finest musicians carry within them a vast and nuanced understanding of Rāga, not as something they can always write down or theorize about, but as something they become in performance. They become the Rāgas themselves. Here two central ideas are: one, embodied transmission, and two, cultural epistemologies. If we begin to think of music transmission as an embodied process, we can approach it from first principles and ask a simple question: what constitutes music at its core? At its most fundamental level, music may be understood as the interplay of sound and silence. Seen it this way, embodied transmission is music, involves the presence of sound, and more specifically, musical sound. This leads us to an important distinction. If the transmission of musical knowledge occurs through musical sound and conveys tacit understanding, knowledge that is felt, internalized, and performed, then what might we call its counterpart, the disembodied transmission? Disembodied transmissions refers to forms of knowledge transfer that do not involve musical sound or tacit experience. This includes knowledge communicated through notation, textual theory, and other symbolic systems. However, in the context of Hindustani Rāga music, HRM, these modes of transmissions are not strictly opposed. Rather, they exist in a dynamic dialectical relationship. The transmission of a raga draws simultaneously on embodied process, that is listening, imitation, and sensorimotor engagement, as well as disembodied forms such as theoretical framework and notational aids. Nevertheless, in keeping with the theme of this conference, I will focus here on the embodied transmission of musical knowledge within Hindustani Rāga music. To make this exploration more structured, I propose to look at Rāga performance as an embodied epistemic system. In such a system, knowledge is not something fixed. It evolves through stages of transformation, much like a seed that gradually becomes a living tree. In this presentation, I examine three interconnected stages. First, the formation of the raga as a seed of knowing. Second, its embodiment through training and sustained practice. And third, its manifestation in performance, where it offers a living proof of its existence. Together, these three stages form a continuous cycle through which musical knowledge is generated, internalized, and ultimately expressed. So I understand that the cerebral orientation of a musician ready to create a rag is the presence of raga knowledge in embodied form. Embodiment in music is not merely the involvement of the body in execution, it is the very condition through which musical thought becomes possible and perceptible. The apparent cerebral readiness of a musician is the emergent surface of an embodied, neuromuscularly integrated knowledge system, in which thought and action co-arise during performance. To deepen this discussion, we may also consider the concept of episteme, the Greek term from which the word epistemology derives. Aristotle described episteme as a form of systematic demonstrable knowledge that can be articulated and verified through demonstration. In the context of raga music, a performance can be understood precisely in this sense, as a demonstration of structured musical knowledge. When a musician renders a raga convincingly, the internalized grammar of the raga becomes audible. From this perspective, a raga rendering or even an audio recording of such a rendering may be viewed as the manifestation of raga knowledge. The performance is the visible tip of a much larger iceberg. Beneath the audible surface lies a dense network of internal processes, years of listening, disciplined practice, motor conditioning, aesthetic judgment, and emotional engagement. Immediately before a performance, the musician carries within the body a particular state of readiness. It is not merely an intellectual memory of notes and rules, but a finely tuned neurosensorimotor orientation, a coordinator system linking the ears, mind, and body. Within this orientation, melodic possibilities can arise spontaneously and be translated instantly into sound through muscular action. If we imagine the process metaphorically, the raga begins as a seed, a small cluster of tonal ideas. Through repeated cultivation and the seed gradually grows into a large branching structures, rather like a banyan tree, whose roots and branches continuously expand. The path from seed to full musical expression involves multiple stages of transformation, each involving perception, cognition, and bodily engagement. In order to examine this process more concretely, I designed a small study focusing on the genesis, transmission, and manifestations of a specific raga. There are several possible approaches to studying such a process. One could, for example, examine an ancient raga and trace its historical transformations through textual sources. Such an approach can indeed yield fascinating results. For instance, historical studies sometimes reveal that a raga currently performed with 7 notes may have approached it in earlier text as a 5-note structure. Yet while such a research illuminates theoretical evolution, it does not necessarily capture the embodied dimension of musical transmission. For my purposes, therefore, I needed a case in which the entire trajectory from genesis to manifestation could be observed with greater clarity. At this point, a raga called Anil Madhyam came into focus. The raga offered a unique opportunity because both its creation, its subsequent transmission, and finally manifestation before listening public are well documented. Before we dive in with more details, let us listen to a glimpse of Anil Madhyam, very short one. I played this piece a few years back, and on the screen you are seeing the synesthetic expression of the rag by my student Sushil Mishra. Anil Madhyam is a rag that has been rendered in a number of highly attended music festivals in different countries. I was directly involved as raga creator and guru. In this study, there are 3 musicians involved. The situation will be clearer when I shall play the video clips for you. The raga got created by the nature using me as the medium, and 2 students, a sarod player and a flautist, learned the raga and performed in different concerts and recordings. These 2 students, one Rajrupa Chaudhary, a sarod player, and Panchajana De, a flautist, rendered the raga for music connoisseurs and lovers. These 2 students have undergone many years of intensive musical training and grooming. Each of their intensive involvement with raga music practicing easily exceeds the widely discussed 10,000-hour threshold associated with mastery in complex fields, a concept popularized by Malcolm Gladwell in his book Outliers. While the exact numerical value 10,000 hours may be debated, but the underlying principle is clear. Deep musical competence requires prolonged and immersive engagement. The genesis of Anil Madhyam began on 26 December 2009, and the Rāga was publicly presented for the first time on 1st January 2010 in Kolkata. The circumstances surrounding its creation, along with reflections on its validations, as a distinctive Rāga, have been documented on the web very nicely. In addition to its initial performance, the Rāga has since been rendered by my students on various instruments, and it has been even inspired artistic responses in other media, including painting and poetry. For the purpose of this discussion, however, I will focus primarily on the audio manifestation of the Rāga. Let us see how Anil Madhyam has been documented and easily accessible. If you search in the Google and type Anil Madhyam, you get this AI overview, then Anil Madhyam in Sanjoy Bandopadhyay.com, and Rajrupa's performance at Darbar, etc., etc. Then let us go here and get the whole description. This is Anil Madhyam, you can see. Then this is, what I told the first time, describe Anil Madhyam. This is all in Bengali, so I am skipping it. Then the general description of Anil Madhyam. Let us see how the Arona Navram goes. Sari Gama Pani Sari Pamagare Sa Pakar Rene Sari Gapalma. Then how Padma Bhushan Dr. M. Balamurali Krishna validated the uniqueness of the Rāga. Then the first performance, the glimpse of the first performance of Anil Madhyam ever played. Then Rajrupa's performance at the Darbar, the same Rāga. Then this is on the sarod. Then Anil Madhyam on the flute by Panchajana. Then synesthetic representation of Anil Madhyam on the painting, visual art. Then a poetry. So this is, and then there's another Gat in Tisra Rupak that I taught to Kalanjit Das, my grand student. So this is pretty nicely documented. Now let us experience the first strokes of Anil Madhyam ever played before public. And this was January 1, 2010. The happenings are going on in a Calcutta auditorium. Let us listen. It's indeed a very crude recording, and the technology was not that good at hand, but it gives you a clear impression that the recording is available on the YouTube. So clear impression of that how the rag felt like while it was initiated. Once the raga had been introduced to audiences, another phase of the epistemological cycle began: pedagogical transmission. I chose a small group of disciples and grand disciples who had already developed strong instrumental control and were comfortable navigating the creative space between established structure and improvisational freedom. These students possessed the ability to expand musical ideas, to listen to themselves critically while performing, and to transform abstract concepts into artistic expressions. To facilitate the learning process, I composed several bandishes in different talas, carefully maintaining the raga structural identity while exploring its expressive possibilities. The students practiced these compositions, put efforts for improvisations within the limits of the raga grammar. After practicing and musically thinking, the renditions slowly started to receive its life and movements. Their musical movements in the raga frame became natural, and they started to fill the raga and came out with myriad interpretations with expressive colors. Gradually, the raga and its performer became one and started building up musical architectures naturally. As their familiarity grew, something remarkable occurred. The disciples began to generate new musical ideas while remaining faithful to the raga grammar. When one of my disciples performed this raga at the famous Darbar festivals in the UK, Bengal Festival in Dhaka, ITC Festival in Kolkata, in Melbourne and other places, the other one shared on digital platforms, also played in different concerts in the country. Now I could observe something interesting. The knowledge had begun to travel independently. Their performances began to resonate with audiences, demonstrating that the raga had successfully moved beyond its initial conception and entered the living stream of musical practice. Now let us listen to a glimpse of Rajrupa's performance at the Darbar, UK. So you see because of the tonal color and the speed of the gut and the expressions and exploring different dimensions, it gave a different color. Of course, the audio system and technical advancement helped to bring out the expressions, but it was very good. Before going to Panchajana's performance on the flute, I must tell you that from a neurophenomenological perspective, this process illustrates how musical knowledge emerges through the dynamic interactions between brain, body, and lived experiences. The musician's sensory perception, cognitive understanding, and motor coordination operate together as an integrated system. The resulting performance becomes not merely an aesthetic event, but also a demonstration of manifestation of embodied knowledge. Now listen to the flute recital, and you can see how it works. The comparison of these three renderings suggests that raga knowledge does not exist as a fixed, fully transferable object. Rather, it operates as a structured field of possibilities defined by grammar, yet realized through lived moment-to-moment decision in performance. What remains constant is the raga lakshana, its grammatical and relational identity. What varies is the mode of knowing that activates the structure, how the musician navigates pitch, time, silence, and gesture in real time. The same raga, therefore, is not merely reproduced but reconstituted in each rendering. These variations point directly to the presence of musically embodied knowledge, a form of knowing that is not externalized by notation or verbal instruction, but internalized within the performer's sensory motor and perceptual system. The embodied knowledge manifests in several ways. Responsive intuition, the ability to choose a specific swara sequence, pauses, or ornamentation without conscious calculation. 2. Instrumental intelligence, a deep tacit understanding how the physical properties of sitar, sarod, or flute shape musical possibilities. 3. Temporal sensibility, the felt negotiation of lay and thala not as abstract counts but as lived rhythmic experience. Micro-decisional making, continuous subtle adjustments in intonation, attack, and gati that cannot be prescripted. In this sense, the Guru's rendering does not function merely as a model to copy, but as a catalyst for internalization. The Shishyas do not replicate the surface, they absorb the underlying logic and re-express it through their own embodied systems. Thus, musical knowledge in raga performance may be understood as a triadic interaction. 1. Abstract structure, that is raga grammar. 2. Embodied cognition, that is internalized lived knowledge. And 3. Situational realization, that is instrument, thala, laya, and context. Like a river flowing through different terrains and course is guided by an underlying force, but its visible form is shaped by the contours it encounters. In these renderings, Anil Madhyam is not a static entity. It's a living epistemic process unfolding through embodied musical actions. Thank you.